I actually have a few slides, so if you'll bear with me. I just want to again reiterate the thanks to Blue Buffalo for their incredibly generous gifts over the past several years, and I'll highlight some of those. But I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about clinical trials overall. So I'm sure many of you have heard about some of the amazing advances there have been in the world of cancer. Like I think almost every day we hear about a new breakthrough, we're going to cure cancer, et cetera, et cetera. And it does seem a bit overwhelming. We always seem on the cusp of making huge discoveries and advances. But the reality is actually more disturbing. It turns out that failure rates in drug development are really high. If you look at the landscape of all drug development, only about 10% of drugs make it through to full approval after initiation in clinical trials. So that's a 90% failure rate, which is astronomical. In the landscape of oncology drug development, it's even worse. It's around only 7% of them make it through. And actually, there was a recent estimate that came out of MIT that said around 4 to 5% of drugs that start at the beginning of human clinical trials make it to approval. So 95% failure rate, which really is just astronomical. And if we go beyond cancer, if you think about some diseases like Alzheimer's disease, it's abysmal. There's been essentially no outcomes that have been improved with drug development, so it's a 100% failure rate. When we look at the cost of failure, that in and of itself is also astronomical. It's now estimated that it costs $2.6 billion to develop a new drug. So $2.6 billion, and that is hugely increased over what it used to cost. For $1 billion about 60 years ago, you could get maybe 40 new drugs. Now you get one drug for $2.6 billion. So we have a high failure rate at an incredible cost, and then you layer on top of that time, which is that drug development and approval takes an incredibly long period of time. The estimates between the preclinical all the way through approval are between 10 to 15 years. So you could spend 10, 12 years working on something, spending $1 billion and have it fail. And this is just not sustainable long term. It's causing huge issues associated with increases in drug prices for those drugs that are approved, but more than that, it's pushing companies out of areas where failure rates are high and the risk is high. So there have been so many Alzheimer's disease failures that many companies have just taken themselves out of the space, which does not bode well for people and for our pets. So all of this has really driven a concept that has emerged called broadly engaged team science, which is that we will be much better at solving problems if we work across disciplines, across landscapes, engage together in a team-based effort to address these issues rather than trying to sort of take a single train down the tracks by ourselves. And so broadly engaged team science has started to drive a number of really interesting and effective and impactful collaborations across both veterinary medicine and human medicine. The first one that I want to mention is something called the CTSA One Health Alliance, or COHA, which is a relatively new alliance of broadly engaged scientists that spans human medicine and veterinary medicine. And it takes academic veterinary partners with human medical partners that are under the guise of translational medicine with the goal of leveraging spontaneous disease in our veterinary patients to help better understand diseases, to better understand how therapeutics work, and ultimately to optimize translational outcomes so that our failure rate is lower. This is based on this principle of One Health that you may have heard, that we're all interconnected under the umbrella of One Health, where animals and humans and the environment really rely upon each other, both to survive and also to advance outcomes. The Association for Clinical and Translational Science has also really taken this on to heart, and so every year at their annual meeting, which has mainly been a human-centric meeting, there's now a COHA section. There are people in veterinary medicine who are talking about translational efforts, and it's really helped raise the visibility of these translational efforts. And the National Center for Advancing Translational Outcomes, or NCATS, has also endorsed this. And so they're very interested in leveraging veterinary patients that have spontaneous disease because they're more likely to really represent the human experience than an induced animal model in like a mouse. The other big thing that has happened over time has been the growth of something called the Comparative Oncology Program, which is about a decade or so old. That's based in the National Cancer Institute, and it was sort of a slow effort to grow. It first started with something called the Comparative Oncology Trials Consortium, which is housed under the NCI, and that consortium really helps to drive novel agents to be tested or evaluated in our pets with cancer, primarily dogs with cancer. And the goal of this is to help them as well as to help human drug development as well to reduce failure rates. And this is driven from the National Cancer Institute. Because this has been so successful, another initiative was born, which is the Comparative Brain Tumor Consortium, which is on the same principle but focused on brain tumors, that we can learn a lot from brain tumors that occur spontaneously in our canine population and bring that back to the human population to help improve outcomes for both human and canine patients. And more recently is really a stunning effort to integrate dogs with cancer into the immuno-oncology realm. I'm sure lots of you have heard about the big advances we've had with immunotherapy. Despite those advances, these tend to be hit or miss in many, many patients. There are some patients that do incredibly well and others that don't. And we really don't understand what we call exceptional responders versus those that actually fail immunotherapy. So the National Cancer Institute has leveraged the Moonshot funds to put money into this new cooperative group of investigators that are working to study new immunotherapy agents and combinations in dogs with spontaneous cancer and then bring that knowledge base back to human medicine. And this is, again, all a cooperative effort. So does it work? The answer is yes, and we have a long history of this working. These are some examples here of efforts that were run by the COTC out of the NCI, Comparative Oncology Program, that really leveraged dogs with cancer to study important questions, like does a tumor therapy actually hit the target it's supposed to hit? Can you engage in personalized medicine, new immunotherapies, and to pick the best drug to move forward into human clinical trials? And all of our patients benefited from this. They got access to state-of-the-art care that they wouldn't have had access to with new therapies that really helped improve their outcomes. Here at Ohio State, we've been involved in a number of efforts that have supported the development of these drugs in particular. And I highlight these because really the work done through the Clinical Trials Office, which I'll talk about in a minute, at Ohio State really foundationally helps support not just the drug development that went forward on the human side, but many of these efforts led to a counterpart effort on the veterinary side where we got a veterinary drug that targeted the same target out of that, so that we got sort of a 2-for-1. Our patients benefited from the trial and the human patients benefited, but also veterinary medicine got a cancer drug back that they wouldn't have had before. So none of this actually would work without an outstanding team of people that support these clinical trials efforts. Those of us that organize trials are the ones that sort of help get the money, but the people who support that are really the foundational elements that make this a success. And so back in 2007, the Clinical Trials Office was formed here. And it started with just 2 people, and it grew and grew. And then in 2013, the Comprehensive Cancer Center at OSU decided to invest and make us a developing shared resource, which is a huge step forward. But really, what essentially made this sustainable long-term that allowed a team of outstanding people to come together and stay together and ensure our ability to keep together as a team by sustaining funding was the generous gift that we got from Blue Buffalo. And that really has been transformational. We have an outstanding team here, and several of them are here. We have Ashley, Dana, Holly, and Allie, if you want to stand up, and then Lily, who's here too, filming. Many of these people have been with us for 7, 8, 10 plus years, which tells you how wonderful they are. We also have an outstanding addition, Dr. Wendy Lorch, who's in the back there, who's now the Associate Director. And these people make it happen. And without them, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So again, thank you for allowing us to keep them and keep this team going. So the team is enormously important, but really our pets and their generous pet parents are the ultimate drivers of this. Without their participation in these trials, we wouldn't be successful. We wouldn't be able to really change outcomes. So we're enormously grateful to these pet heroes and their pet parents. But finally, none of this again would occur without the participation of our partners and our collaborators. And building partnerships is the foundation of collaborative team science. There are just some of them listed there, but this is my segue into Dr. Ryan Roberts, who really has been a phenomenal collaborator and partner in many of our translational efforts. Dr. Roberts hails from Utah, Salt Lake City, but has spent much of his career now in Columbus, Ohio, getting his MD, PhD at the Med Center and doing his fellowship in oncology, and now taking a faculty position at Nationwide Children's Hospital, where he's a pediatric oncologist. Dr. Roberts is really a big believer in this broadly engaged team science. He works together hand in hand with veterinary oncologists to help really address critical issues associated with outcomes in both children and dogs with bone cancer. So with that, I will introduce Ryan.